diverse ecosystem, the Himalayas, the deserts, the Indus Delta, and it is also one of the regions most devastated by the climate crisis through floods, drought, heat waves, and glacial melt. Today, we are joined by five incredible panelists from across South Asia, and I'm looking forward to the insights they will be sharing with us. Let me introduce our incredible panel for today. Joining from Nepal, we have Irina Kharal. She is an environmental professional currently serving as the Climate Change Project Coordinator at the Nepal Peace Building Initiative. She leads high impact resilience projects across six rural municipalities where she focuses on bridging the gap between grassroots needs and local government planning through climate budgeting and adaptation strategies. With over 7 years of experience in climate action, she has successfully established climate change advocate group and led national youth consultation for Nepal's second nationally determined contribution. From India, we have Sanmida, who is an agriculture student. She is very passionate about sustainable innovation and climate action. She has also been a part of the FXB Climate Advocates program and have presented research at multiple international conferences. Her current research work focuses on transforming agriculture and organic waste into value-added eco-friendly products. She is currently leading a community level project that aims to convert temple waste into a sustainable ecosystem. From Sri Lanka, we have Shabnam Mohammed. She is an attorney at law and legal researcher. Her work focuses on the right based intersection of climate, sustainable future, democracy, and systems thinking. She uses interdisciplinary analysis in litigation and policy to examine how legal framework can enable equitable and resilient governments in the face of systematic global challenges. From Pakistan, we have Aisha Zakir. She is an associate director at Climate Forward Pakistan, where she leads the team on policy, research, and development. She is a climate activist, youth leader, and environmentalist committed to advancing climate action and sustainable development. And from Bangladesh, we have a very young Aruba Farooq. She is a 19-year-old Bangladeshi climate and environmental justice activist who began her advocacy at the age of 13. She successfully petitioned for Bangladesh Planetary Emergency Declaration, which led to climate and environment being integrated into the national curriculum. Currently serving as the Deputy Executive Coordinator of YouthNet Global and has successfully completed her tenure of the Adolescent Ambassador for Climate and Health at the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. At COP28, she highlighted the links between climate change, health, and child rights. So, we have a very extraordinary group of panelists with us today. So, welcome all of you, and thank you for making time for this very needed conversation. So, I want to begin by grounding us because I think before we talk about solutions, we need to really feel the reality. And the reality, it is very different upon where you are standing. So, I am going to go out to each of our panelists and ask, what does the climate crisis actually look like where you live? Not in policy documents, but in real life. So, Irina from Nepal, I want to ask you, your work it directly like you directly work with communities in rural Nepal across six municipalities. So, what does climate vulnerability looks in the lives of the people you serve? Not in the data, but in day-to-day reality. Hey,
Hey, you are.
Irina, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are. Okay, can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you for the question, Naruz. Talking about climate vulnerabilities in Nepal, so in the communities that I work across rural Nepal, when we talk about climate vulnerabilities does not first appear as statistics. All right. So, climate vulnerabilities appear in search of water, in heat stress, in failed harvest, and in anxiety and fear of the future, and people living in uncertainty. What I see on the ground is that climate vulnerability is really about daily survival being harder and harder every day. In some communities, for example, there's Southern Plain Tarai in Nepal, which is basically the grain basket of Nepal. It feeds whole Nepal, right? So the main source of water in that area is groundwater, the bore wells. So, what the communities have been telling us is that the water sources are declining so deep that now they have to go down up to 300 to 500 feet to get water. And by that, they are struggling to get, struggling even for drinking water as well. And just we cannot imagine for other purposes. And if we talk about hilly areas and in mountains, the natural springs are drying out. So the families, especially for women and young girls, it is really difficult because they have to travel even farther for getting water, spend more time, and face burden every day. And if we talk about farmers, their agriculture calendars, the calendars that they had been following, now they cannot rely on that due to delayed monsoons, drought, floods, and emergence of new pests in their crops, due to which it has led to food insecurity, huge economic loss to the farmers. So, to the children that we have worked in the communities, the children have said that even schools are shut down for a few days due to extreme heat. They cannot study under the tin roof, and with limited fans and limited facilities. And even during evenings, when they have to study due to frequent power cuts and heat stress, they are unable to concentrate on their studies. So it affects everyone from farmers to children to young youths, young women, everyone. So when we talk about climate vulnerabilities, statistics is one thing. It has really affected their daily lives. When we talk about climate vulnerabilities, we talk about water, we talk about food, we talk about education, dignity, and even the futures of the vulnerable families. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for telling about the grassroots realities of communities in Nepal. And about 80% of Nepal food is dependent upon its agriculture. So as you said that the agriculture schedule of Nepal, it has been quite changed. So Nepal is definitely going to face food insecurity due to the climate change. And also, rural communities, as you said, they are the one who are very affected by it. So they have no insurance about what they should do. They have no early warning system in Nepal for that as well. Okay, so moving on, I wanna ask Sanvida from India. So India feeds over 1 billion people. Yet its agriculture system, it is under enormous climate stress. From your research, what is the most overlooked pressure point? The one that rarely makes headline, but it is quite causing harm.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, okay. So, what Arina spoke before was also a relatable thing to the Indian agriculture system currently. And what point that I overlook in Indian agriculture today is so climate change, the effect of climate change cannot be concised into a single one as crop failure because it is a chain of reaction that has been occurred. For example, when we take increase in temperature or temperature spikes and erratic rainfall patterns, which comes along with pest and disease outbreaks. So there is this thing that pests and diseases, they sprout in a season where there is high rainfall and high temperature. So when there are changes in these patterns, disease and pest outbreaks are very common. And this again leads the farmers to buy more and more chemicals. And usage of these chemicals during high temperature will again cause volatilization. This will again push the farmer to buy more pesticides, which increases the cost of cultivation for the farmers. So it is like a chain of reaction. Again, this pesticide that has been excess in the soil will contaminate groundwater eventually. It will eventually contaminate our food too, and it will affect our health too. So all these data will not be shown in any of the agricultural data or any agriculture policies, because all of these effects are in ground and they are not taken into account into any statistics. So the problem that I overlook is that farmers know something is wrong with your field, something is wrong with your soil, with your health, with your crop yields, but they don't know how to connect these dots up. They are the least responsible for climate change, yet they are the most affected. So what is the problem that I overlook is that is the knowledge gap that has been present between the farmers and the scientific community is something that I overlook too.
One thing, thank you, Sanmita, for your insights, very valuable insights as well. So, India, it has an estimated loss of $10 billion per year in crop damages due to climate-related events. So, what are your thoughts on that as well? Because you have said that agriculture and all that thing, they are causing a chain reaction. So, what do you think can be a solution to that, or what are your thoughts on that as well?
So, speaking of scientifically, if we want to give out solution, there are many practices like climate resilient varieties could be used, and there are also culturally followable practices which includes mulching or using of drip irrigation for efficient water. So, there are certain technologies. So, providing incentives for that would be a very good either would be a very good thing to solve this problem. But for me, what I would actually personally tell is that we have to solve the core problem of what is causing this climate change, be it industries, be it whatever the source that has been causing pollution. We have to set regulations in that rather than pushing farmers to adapt. Yes, it is very important for farmers to adapt climate resilient varieties and all those things, but we have to also solve the core source that has been responsible for all this climate change. Because from farmer end, whatever is done, it could only be a temporary solution, because all these climate resilient varieties could only be resistant for certain years, and again we have to introduce new varieties for those pest and disease resistant. So it would only be a temporary solution. So until and unless we are not solving the core problem that is causing climate change, we would still be in a loop.
Okay, thank you so much, Sanmita, for your insights. Now, moving on to Shabnam. She is from Sri Lanka. So, Sri Lanka, it has faced very economic collapse and devastating floods and prolonged droughts, often simultaneously. So, from a legal and rights perspective, who is falling through the cracks in the response?
Thank you for that pertinent question, Aruj. Like you said, Sri Lanka has been facing crisis after crisis. The most recent was Cyclone Ditwa in November 2025. And each disaster or crisis has compounded the next. And these are not isolated events. Each of these crises and disasters have in turn violated human rights ranging from right to health, environment, housing, culture, and means of subsistence. So what we are seeing right now is a growing interplay between climate change, disaster, and uncertainty in people's lives. So the impacts are becoming even more complex and going far beyond what we traditionally think as climate change and environmental issues. So from a legal point of view, those who are falling through the cracks are those who are structurally marginalized and those who are invisible. For example, farmers who are facing erratic rainfall or right now drought, a heat spell that is unbearable. Then plantation workers in the hill country, coastal communities and fishing communities who have been affected by environmental disasters and oil spills, urban poor in Colombo and outskirts, and also female-headed households. So Sri Lanka is in the front line of the impacts, although it is not one of those high carbon emitting countries. So our responses have to be resilient, but rather it is reactive and temporary because the government and the policy and legal frameworks treat it as a one instead of a cycle. So what we are missing is a clear recognition of these climate harms through a rights-based framework. So the access remains deeply unequal. So the most affected lack the resources or institutional access to seek justice. So the real gap is we have laws, but do we have equitable access?
Okay, thank you. And can you tell me that the communities, the people who are falling through these cracks, is the law actually a tool that they can use, or all these laws surrounding these people are they just on paper? So what do you think about that?
So Sri Lanka on paper has quite a robust framework. We have fundamental rights litigation. We have principles of public trust doctrines that's used in case law. We have regulatory bodies like the Sri Lanka Environmental Authority, and we also have, sorry, am I audible? It was a bit stuck for a
Yes,
bit.
yes, you're audible.
Yes, okay. So these tools, in theory, allow citizens to challenge those harmful developments and hold the government accountable. But this is not a problem of absence of a framework, but it's about implementation. Like most South Asian countries face. So the barrier is regarding access. Because litigation is expensive, it is slow, and it's highly technical. So these marginalized communities might have to seek pro bono help from legal aid commissions or lawyers who are willing to take up that workload. And there is weak enforcement. This could be coupled with economic instability, political instability right now, and pressures that outweigh these issues because countries focus on development rather than focusing on these issues. So we also lack framework that is climate specific for climate liability, loss, and damage. So we lack legal recognition of very climate specific frameworks because right now there are very complex issues such as food insecurity, internal displacement, and mobility. All of those are not captured fully. So we don't have the adaptive capacity to connect the resources, the frameworks, and the institutions. So there is a bit of a fragmentation. So this is where all of those people fall through the cracks.
Okay, thank you, Shabnam. Now, moving towards Aisha. She is from Pakistan. So, Aisha, Pakistan has experienced one of the worst floods in recorded history in 2022. So, from where you sit in policy and research, how has that catastrophe shaped or failed to shape the country's climate direction since then?
Hello, everyone. And first, Aruj, thank you for having me for this amazing discussion. So, as you already mentioned, the 2022 floods of Pakistan, I think 2022 floods of Pakistan, they're not just some natural or anthropogenic disasters. Those floods were the turning point for our nation, for Pakistan, because one third of our country was submerged. You see, from the northern Pakistan, from Gilgit Baltistan to southern Pakistan, millions were displaced, and it showcased our vulnerability. So, from a policy perspective, the floods, they did push climate higher on the national agenda, and we saw, stronger language like adaptation, terms like resilience and mitigation and climate finance in our government discussions. And also, Pakistan became more vocal globally about climate change, especially around the topics of climate justice and loss and damage fund. But there are still some gaps because we are not seeing some, implementation on the ground. Because many affected communities, they are still rebuilding without climate resilient infrastructure. See, there are policies, but there are no, implementation of those policies. So I would say that the floods, they do shape our awareness and our voice on a, higher level, but they have not, fully reshaped our systems, the whole government systems. So I think that is where the real work still needs to happen. Our government, they must, they have to do something about it.
Okay, thank
So
you,
yeah.
Aisha. So I just want to relate what Aisha has said with Shabnam that most of the laws and policies they are very rigid in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, but where we are failing is in implementing them. So that's what I got from your insights. Now, moving on to Aruba, she is from Bangladesh. So, Aruba, I want to ask you, Bangladesh is often called the front line of the global climate crisis, but beyond the statistics, what is the human story that you feel the world is not fully hearing?
Hi everyone, thank you. I was listening to all the esteemed panelists. So I think that yes, Bangladesh has a lot of stories and a lot of statistics, but I think one part is that the climate crisis in Bangladesh is not a future; it's the very present. And if we look at Bangladesh geography, it's in the downstream. So if we look at Nepal, you have the Himalayas, but if you look at India and Pakistan, we have transboundary rivers, and Bangladesh is just the end of the major rivers that flow through South Asia, like the Ganga, like the Jamuna, and other rivers. And and that actually makes us geographically interesting, but at the same time vulnerable. And that has turned Bangladesh into a hub which where climate crisis is seen uh, as much as humanly as it is possible in the negative sense. And it has created a gender justice issue. It has created a child rights and a human rights issue because at present when I started as a child rights activist. I was 13 when I became a climate activist. So I started seeing it as a child rights crisis. And then when I went through the education system, I saw how climate crisis was impacting the education when the floods were there, when the cyclones were there, and how much mental and emotional toll it had on 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 the children. And then as I have been growing up, I see many of my surroundings turn differently for women in this country, especially increasing child marriages, increasing dowry, increasing domestic and gender-based violences. And 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 then I also see it as a human rights issue because it's actually resulting in food security issues and water security issues. And overall, I would say that Bangladesh, climate crisis is a multidimensional crisis that's impacting people, impacting human lives in every possible way. And every part of this country has stories that will bring tears.
Okay, thank you, Aruba. And as you said, that all of the transboundary rivers they end near Bangladesh in Bangladesh. So there is a statistic that by 2050, if everything around the world, if the climate change is still happening and emissions are going to be the same way, then 17% of the Bangladesh land could be submerged due to sea level rise. So, like, that's a huge number where Bangladesh is definitely at the front line of climate change. Okay, so now I just want to ask everyone from our participants where everyone is from, or which city or which country they are from. If you can just write a comment. I would really appreciate if you guys were just tell me where are you from. Okay, we got Adil from Pakistan. Okay, FIFA from Rawalpindi, Pakistan. Okay, we have someone from Sindh as well. Do we have someone from another country? Okay, we have people from various cities in Pakistan. Okay, we have someone from Bangladesh as well. So Sohan from Bangladesh. Okay. So we have quite the diverse audience for our incredible panelists. Okay, now moving on, I wanna thank you all for what you have shared. It was so insightful and so rich. So I want to move on now from describing the problem to interrogate how we can provide solution. Arena, Irina, your work sits precisely at the intersection of national policy and grassroots reality. So, climate budgeting, local government planning, community capacity building, what most commonly break down in the gap between a policy on paper and life on the ground?
Okay, first of all, I'm really inspired by Aruba. So, knowing that you have started your climate action journeys from such a young age and hearing about your story. Okay, moving on to the question. So, in my experience, what breaks down most often is the interconnection between the actual policies and the ground realities. Like Aisa just mentioned that the national policies have such big words like adaptation, mitigation, resilience, inclusion, right? So it's quite similar in Nepal as well. Our national policies are often they sound very strong with heavy words such as adaptation, mitigation, resilience, climate finance and all. But on the ground, what communities feel, what the communities have been telling us is that they feel that the plannings, the policies are too much top down, too much generic, and they are really disconnected from what the ground realities, they are really disconnected from the ground realities. So let me give you an example from the southern plain of Nepal. Last year, the Madhes, it is also called Madhes, so it was really hard hit by drought, and the ministry also declared it as a disaster crisis zone because all the 8 districts from that province were hard hit by extreme drought. So, what our then Prime Minister did was he visited the site and declared to establish 500 deep boring. You guys understand deep boring, right? The bore wells. So yes, but when we talk to the locals and the communities, what we came to know is that they told us that the deep bores are temporary solutions. They also mentioned it as a painkiller, right? Because they are not sustainable. What the community actually needed was the government to come and discuss with them, ask what do they actually need. What the community actually needed was establishment of more recharge ponds, investment on wetland restoration, more rainwater storage facilities, more community-based water storage, water management initiatives. Communities needed such things, but our government came and decided to declare deep borings, when in reality, Madhes already has hundreds and thousands of deep borings which are not in use. So, what we commonly see is that there is a really disconnection between what the community actually need and what is the priority of the government. So, basically, there is a huge gap in the priority of the government and actual need of the community. So yeah, the biggest breakdown I have to say is that there are many policies which are made for the communities, but not with the communities. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you so much, Irina, for telling us that Nepal is also facing the same issue as Sri Lanka and Pakistan. And do you know about any community that managed to have some kind of good solution, or all the boards were just the solution? Did the community itself did anything for it?
uh, where there were already some recharge points established, so they were able to rely on that and provide drinking water to some 200 to 300 households. But remaining families, they had to shift their paddy plantation season, because not only for drinking but for irrigation also, deep borings were the only source for them. So they had to shift their cropping season as well, cropping timeline.
Okay, thank you, Irina. Now moving on to Aisha. Aisha, Pakistan has vocal youth advocates, NDC commitments, and access to international climate finance conversation. Yet implementation it remains weak. As someone working on evidence-based policy, where does the disconnect most often happen?
Aruj, first, thank you so much for this question. And I believe that it's a very sensible question. Yeah. Because the disconnect in Pakistan, because it most often happens at three different levels, or you can say three different areas that I observe. First, the coordination, because climate policy it developed at the federal level, but see the implementation it lies with all the provinces and all the local governments. So there is often a lack of alignments, clarity, and ownership across the levels. And after the 18th amendments, the EPAs and all every province had their own EPA now. And the second is, but the coordination is not good between these provinces, these EPAs, local governments. The second major issue is data and evidence. Policies are sometimes designed without strong data, localized data. So I think this means that the solutions they don't always reflect the realities of that communities, especially the most vulnerable communities, because I am a researcher and I know it's very hard to find data and evidence. And the third and the major one is inclusion. Youth, local communities, and the frontline voices, they're not meaningfully integrated into these decision-making processes. As Arina mentioned, okay, policies, they are written for people, but not always with them. So those people, they're not on the tables where their future is being discussed. So it is very important youth inclusion, local communities inclusion, vulnerable voices, the indigenous people, they're very important. If the governments they are making policies, they should include these voices, these peoples. So yeah, that's the three major issues between the where the disconnect happens between policy and its implementation.
Okay, thank you, Aisha. Also, I want to ask you, like, what is the pain point that should be discussed? So, is the problem the policies themselves, the institutions that are meant to carry them out, or the political will? So, what do you think is the pain point?
Interestingly, Pakistan does not lack commitments. We have strong frameworks. We have active engagement, we can say, in global climate discussions from our government point of view, or maybe some very strong organizations, NGOs. what we lack, what the major problem is, consistent follow through. So the major challenge is its execution, the execution of the policy. And closing that gap requires not just better systems, but more inclusive and accountable one. So the thing is that we need better and more accountable systems to solve this issue.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Now moving on to Wade, it's very interesting. She is converting temple waste into a sustainable ecosystem. So Sanmida, a solution that is local, culturally rooted, and science-based. How do you scale something like that without losing what makes it work?
So
Sanmida,
when
am I audible?
am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So when people hear temple waste, they usually think of some withered flowers that been swept off and thrown away. So I saw some value in this flower. So this is a small project. It is nothing grand or it is nothing large scale. It has been done within the community. So what we did was we started collecting flowers from a local temple and we dried it and we processed it with the help of the community itself. So to my surprise, a part of the product that we produced was bought by the temple itself and a part was sold in this local market. It was nothing of huge demand, but the demand was that we realized that people need our products because it was organic. So we were not asking anyone to change their habits. The flowers were already there, and we just changed what happens after prayer. So and the response was awesome. So for a small village project that has been run for a short time, that felt significant to me. It was not sustained by any funding or external support. It moved because the community saw value in it and the product spoke for itself. So this is what I think real sustainability looks like. It does not include any complex supply chains or any imported technologies or any big interventions from outside, but something that is so rooted and it is present culturally and geographically there itself. And it also should make quite sense to everyone involved. So that's what I think real sustainability would look like.
Or is it good? Thanks, Anmita. So I want to ask you that the government or other institutions are interested in scaling up this business with you, or are they interested in this model?
Yes. So as we are doing it as a very small project, so currently for any organization to fund this would be very difficult. So if I have scaled up using my own fund in 2 to 3 temples, and if I showed some promised outcomes, then maybe it is possible for some government under any government organization to fund me this project. I'm also open to looking for any funding for this project. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now moving on to Shabnam, you are an environmental lawyer from
Hi, Aruj, you were breaking up. I didn't quite catch the question. Could you repeat, please?
Okay, yes, for sure. So, Shabnam, you are a lawyer, and law across South Asia, it is often very, very strong on our paper, but it is very weak in practice. So, what legal tools currently exist to hold governments and corporations accountable, and what is critically missing in your eyes?
Thanks, Aruj. I think I mentioned this in my previous answer as well about how we have litigation And we have also policy. So litigation is when you go to court and hold governments and corporations accountable. Sri Lanka is developing quite a robust framework in terms of public held corporations and multinational companies attribute to environmental liability, and we have quantified it or allowed regulatory bodies to quantify it so they can be held accountable on paper, but also replant or repopulate what they've destroyed. If they've built factories or buildings in protected areas and forests, and if they've destroyed forests, they have been ordered by the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka to repopulate, or they have asked conservator generals to actually quantify the amounts. So we have had many landmark judgments and cases on that end. But then again, it's about the will, like the others mentions. There is political will and there is promise, but there is a structural imbalance where you have to, there are competing interests, right? You have economic interests, and then you have to also ensure that the environment is protected. So environmental safeguards sometimes by the ones who are implementing these projects are treated as obstacles. So there is cure when there are issues, but we have to focus on preventing this, so then the Supreme Court or another regulatory come impose sanctions or penalize these bodies, because however much you quantify a damage and get a regulatory body or hold a corporation liable, these impacts are irreversible, right? So we have to make sure the legal tools are continuing to be robust and hold governments and corporations accountable. But we should also ensure that the environmental safeguards are treated as a welcome initiative, not as an obstacle. So it has to be an obligation that the citizen and the corporation is doing willingly. I think across the board, across the South Asian region, that mentality has to be developed, because if not, it is bypassed, diluted, or fast-tracked. So the safeguards have to be applied more strictly and powerful. It has to be powerful enough to hold corporations and state-backed projects accountable. So transparency in approvals, independent oversight bodies, and protection against political interference all have to be used in a dynamic way. So these legal tools will continue to be applied holistically instead of selectively or as a backup option.
Okay, thank you so much, Shabna. Now, moving to Aruba, Bangladesh has become a global example of climate adaptation and community resilience. What has worked, and in your opinion, what approach do you wish other South Asian countries would borrow?
Thank you, Aruj, for these insightful questions. Yes, Bangladesh is often known as an adaptation hero and also like as a global role model for resilience. And I think that has worked for Bangladesh because we have for now worked a lot, progressed a lot on climate adaptation. And I think our communities in Bangladesh are very resilient. They focus on they focus on local and indigenous knowledges. If I have to give you an example, then I would give you the example of the project that worked in the hill tracks of Bangladesh, and where the community and the Hill District City Council actually designed a project together to solve the water scarcity, because people there were not having accessibility to water because of the heat waves, because they collect water from the high hills, and most of the times this responsibility goes to the women. And And the district council and the community, they actually use the indigenous knowledge to actually solve the water scarcity problems to some extent. And I think the current situation of Bangladesh is that we have a lot of plans. We have the Bangladesh National Adaptation Plans. We have submitted a very well formulated NDC 3.0. It has limitations, but for now, for a South Asian country, for a vulnerable country, which emits only like 0.4%, it is ambitious. And then we have also like Bangladesh climate prosperity plans and then other plans. But often what the problems is with funding and is with implementation because the international climate funding is becoming scarce every day. And the world leaders are becoming more focused on spending on wars rather than solving the climate, biodiversity, adaptation, and resilience issues. And then Bangladesh is also going to graduate the LDCs. So these are the ones that are creating the finance and the implementation problems of these plans. But at the same time, at this moment, we do not, when we are making the policies in Bangladesh, the national policies of other issues, we are not putting the climate and environment forward. Sometimes we're just sidelining it, or we are working in silos so that the ministerial coordination, the policy coordination, the finance coordination, there are lackings in that, which we need to focus on. And we also need to work more on inclusion, especially inclusion of women, inclusion of marginalized communities in every part of the society, starting from politics, starting from democracy, government systems, social systems. And we need to do this like step by step and make sure that inclusion of marginalized, vulnerable, indigenous communities and their knowledges, their opinions, their ideas, their innovations are actually included, heard, and considered. At the same time, sometimes we have a tokenization of youth because we are not empowering the youth. Sometimes we're just having them as participants, silent participants, but not as active stakeholders. So we also need to have active stakeholders, and we also need to work on a more inclusive, more disciplinary approach in terms of research, education, knowledge, and technical skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. And just as you have said, that funding is very limited. And right now, what the world is going through, all of our funds as well is going towards war. So I think that's a very important discussion that we should also have. And most of the countries here in South Asia, so we have 7 countries, and these countries are not the culprits and they are not the one emitting so many of these gases that are causing climate change, but still we are on the front line of climate change. So internationally, the countries that are responsible should be the one giving us funding, but that also requires quite a systematic approach. And I think countries here in the South Asia, they are falling through that because what these countries they need is a proper planning, a proper agenda they need that we would go through, we would implement, but they are not getting that from our country. So maybe there is an issue or a problem that we are also, facing or we are creating ourselves maybe. So and now I just wanna ask everyone, like anybody can respond from our panelists. So what is the one idea or policy or grassroots approach from another South Asia country represented here today? So what would it be and why? What would you choose? So there are many stories that all of the panelists told us today. So if anything was interesting, and a solution that really catch your eye. So I just want to ask you, what would that be? So, any one of our panelists wanna talk about that?
Can I go first, Aruj?
Yes. Yes, Aisha.
All right. I think our South Asian countries, the youth, they're doing amazing work. But I saw these videos of people of Bangladesh. They are, cleaning the whole streams. And as Aruba mentioned that they use indigenous knowledge. So I believe the people of Bangladesh, they're very community oriented. So I would borrow that thing from, that approach to community-based adaptation because what stands out is how deeply localized their solutions are. Whether it is, flood resilient housing or community preparedness. So they are not just like, some common policies. They're systems. They are, people are linked with each other and they understand these things, they trust each other, and they actively use that thing. So for Pakistan, where climate impacts are like really intensifying, this kind of, I think, grounded and community-driven approach is essential. So I think I really want to borrow this approach, and it also ensures that resilient is not like something we planned, but we lived this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much,
Was
Aisha.
it more power to all of these South Asian countries, guys? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Anyone else that wanna go and answer that?
Uh, so yes, I was also just like looking at this and thinking that we also as like South Asian countries need more more collaboration, and that's where I think that we as youth can mention. And if you have noticed, today we have a all women panel, which is something we always not get to see. Living in South Asian countries, we often have manels, men-led panels, and not. So it's a rare situation, and I really appreciate that. And we can also explore further if we can actually jointly advocate. Like if Nepal has an issue that is about the climate, because we need to transcend these South Asian boundaries, because we need to understand that what happens in one side of the planet is actually impacts like the other side. What happens in the upstream in Nepal and in India and Pakistan also impacts the downstreams and the island countries like South Asia and Maldives. So we can actually think, how can we hold together our governments accountable, our businesses accountable, our corporations accountable, transcending the boundaries and create a new idea of like South Asian solidarity. And we like if Pakistan has an issue of climate injustice, of environmental ecocide, we can all raise the voice together. If Bangladesh has is if the Bangladeshi youth are advocating for something, that's where the India, Nepal, Pakistan, we all South Asian youth can actually agree and come together and strengthen that advocacy, share the word, and I think that's where we can all work together. That was my idea.
Oh, thank you so much, Aruba. And more power to all the women here and to all the women across South Asia. So we have 5 countries here today with us, 5 different languages, 5 different governments, and 5 different climate realities. We share our rivers, we share air, and we share our weather system, and we also share our future. So, what does it actually mean to unite South Asia around sustainability? Now, moving to Irina from Nepal, you have led national youth constitutions for Nepal's NDC. Do you think that South Asian youth are genuinely building a shared identity around climate? Or are we all still too divided by national politics and our borders?
Okay, am I audible? Okay. So I think the honest answer would be both. Yes, the shared regional identity is actually emerging, but at the same time, I think we are a bit isolated from border politics and everything. Because youth across South Asia, as we have been discussing here, we have come to know that we are sharing similar climate realities, right? We talk about heat waves, floods, drought, food insecurity, climate induced displacement, pollution, and anxiety about our future. So, the emotional and political basis for a shared regional identity remains there already. But at the same time, I think our organizing modality is still too separated by language, funding structures, and national politics. We often talk about similar issues, but from different corners. And I think sometimes we lack regional coordination. But also, having said that, what gives me hope is events like this, as we youths, we women, female youths have come together from South Asia to discuss on common topic. So things like this gives me hope, and also, I would say that we have come together, and this shows our solidarity towards a common issue. So, yeah, our shared identity is growing, but at the same time, the next step would be building, increasing South Asian solidarity, as Aruba mentioned earlier. And I think we should move beyond parallel struggles. I know our struggles are moves parallelly, but I think we should move beyond that and advocate for more collective regional voices. Thank you.
Thank you, and that was beautifully said. I also think that just all of our struggles are quite similar, but we are not coordinating on that level. So that's why this session is much, much needed, especially today in this era. It's very much needed. So moving on to Aisha, what would be meaningful South Asian climate cooperation would look like to you? Not diplomatically, but practically. What would you actually change on the ground?
Aruj, when the word collaboration or cooperation comes, I always mention the seventh SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, that is collaboration and partnership. And see, meaningful cooperation in South Asia would move beyond agreements and into shared systems. So, practically, this could be something like regional earning warning systems for floods and heat waves. As Aruba mentioned, that Bangladesh, it also experiences heat waves. Same goes with Pakistan. So that will give us the idea, okay, the data across the borders, because coordination is very important. Climate impacts, they do not respect the political boundaries, so our responses should not be limited by them either. So it could also mean collaborative research, so countries, they're working together on climate data, and same thing should go with between Pakistan and India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. So we have to work together for solutions and innovations that are regionally relevant. And importantly, youth collaboration, the same thing that we are doing right now. So South Asian youth are already connected by, shared challenges. So creating such kind of platforms where they can co-create solutions across borders would be amazing, would be powerful. So cooperation to me is not, it's not just it's a diplomatic dialogue that our officials, they do on COPs or SBs. It's something like shared action, shared knowledge, and shared responsibility that we have to do on such kind of platforms. Yes, that's needed actually.
Okay, thank you so much, Aisha. And I also want to mention someone from Our participant, he's saying that we should organize youth engagement initiatives, local inclusivity, as we can make policies and implementation in Pakistan. So that's very right.
Exactly.
Require, if that's your name. So that is much, much needed today. Now moving on to Sanmita from India. You are working at the intersection of science, sustainability, and grassroots impacts. What does the next generation of South Asian climate leaders need to look like in terms of skills, mindsets, or approach? Over to you, Sanmida. Sanmida, am I audible? Am I audible, everyone?
Yes,
Yes, you
you
are.
are.
Okay. So I guess Sanmida is unable to hear me. Now moving on to Shabnam. I want to ask that climate justice is increasingly entering legal and policy language. In your view, are South Asian nations actually moving toward climate accountability, or is it still largely symbolic?
It's a very interesting question, Aruj. So I think we're definitely in a transitional moment. There's a shift, and climate justice, legal arguments, policy language, and even across South Asia, the courtrooms, this dynamic is shifting. The conversation has entered, and that matters if you're being honest. But are we still aspirational? Because this is not fully operational yet, right? But we have to be, we have progressed over the years, so that is a welcome move. But accountability, climate accountability requires a couple of things, such as you have having clear obligations, and then you should also have measurable standards, because there is no point having elaborate commitment if you have implementation and enforcement, right? So that has to be the standard, and there needs to be consequences for failure from the government and those proposing these accountability measures. So in Sri Lanka and across the region, based on what all of these powerhouse of ladies have told me, all of us have economic pressures and we're facing political instability, and development priorities override environmental safeguards. But the language is there, the political will sometimes may be missing, but resilience from youth and climate activists keep, the stakes keep getting higher. So the real test is whether climate commitments can be enforced, not just on paper, but domestically through courts, and also most importantly by citizens through law. So to answer your question very directly, from symbolism, we have moved a lot far, but there's a lot to go. We are close, but we have to keep moving. Thanks, Aruj.
Thank you, Shabnam, so much. And I want to ask, is Sanmita is still in the session? Am I audible, Sanmita, to you? I think she is not in the session. Maybe she has some kind of internet issues. Okay, so moving on to Aruba. Bangladesh contributes almost nothing to global emissions, yet it has some of the heaviest consequences. How do you hold that tension, and what does justice look like from where you stand?
Yes, indeed. So Bangladesh definitely is one of the least emitters, and it is also part of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. That means it is also one of the most vulnerable countries. So that means that we have a dual reality. I mean, we do not emit that much of carbon dioxide or have not contributed historically to climate change as much as developed or industrialized countries have, but still we are paying the heaviest price of the climate crisis, of the biological collapse, of the environmental degradation issues. And a lot of the pollution that Bangladesh faces is also transboundary, coming from other South Asian cities and other South Asian industrialist countries. So in that way, Bangladesh contributes the least, but it still suffers the most. So that's what climate injustice looks like to me. And right now, climate crisis is not just limited to Bangladesh. It's also extends to all of South Asia. And in that sense, I think that Bangladesh climate situation is like that we also need to hold the other countries, the more historically responsible countries, accountable for the historical emissions and the current emissions. And at the same time, we have a global and at the same time, Bangladesh is in a urgent emergency to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees, if not 2 degrees, and also adhere to the Paris Agreement. And every minute, I think Bangladesh is sinking. Its communities are suffering. In the coast, we see desalined waters. In the north, we see droughts, crop insecurity, heat waves. In the hill tracts, we see water scarcity, loss of livelihoods, and in the mid, where the most rivers flow and the land is at the most fertile, we are seeing riverbank erosions. We are seeing that changed water flows that are causing flash floods, that are causing loss of fertility in the land, loss of agriculture, loss of water. And overall, that creates an urgent situation. And at the same time, we also have to understand that the climate crisis is an intergenerational crisis. My generation, when I was 13, I started my climate activism, but my generation was not responsible for creating this crisis. It was created by my previous generations, but it's still my generation, the Gen Z, has to actually bear the burden of the climate crisis, bear the burden of the warfare that's going all around the world, and still pursue everything. So it's also an intergenerational justice issue, a gender justice issue. So in that sense, I think that we need to treat the Bangladeshi climate crisis as with dignity, so that it's not just charity, it's not just donations, but it's also uh, it's also finance with justice, finance with dignity, where Bangladesh is treated as a stakeholder, not as a charity case. And I think the world needs to appreciate Bangladesh for the disaster management, because we have so much frequent flash floods, droughts, and cyclones, but still the loss of life is still minimal. And our communities are trying to recover. Our communities are trying to adapt. But now that needs to be addressed, because how much more communities can adapt to a crisis that they have not created, that they are not responsible for. The loss and damage for all the non-economic and economic causes needs to be compensated. It needs to be reparations for all the historical emissions as well. And the world needs to support Bangladesh and the entire South Asia to move forward with resilience and prosperity, not just vulnerability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Aruba.
Aruj,
Now, yes,
if you could
Surabhi.
just check my messages. So yeah, thank you. Go on.
Okay, Sanvida has joined our session, right? So, I want to ask you that you are working at the intersection of science, sustainability, and grassroots impact. What does the next generation of South Asian climate leaders need to look like in terms of skills, mindsets, or their approach?
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible.
So when I think about the next generation of South Asian climate leaders, I think they have to be rooted alongside being skilled up. So before we learn to speak in international forums or in public policies or in policy statements, so we have to learn in villages because so much of knowledge that we are desperate to generate is already in the hands of a farmer that is in a village who has been studying this climate change and his soil for over 40 years. So I think the next generation of leaders should be humble enough to recognize that. And also at the same time, I think that the leaders should blend a traditional and modern science together because one cannot exist without the other. Because even a technology, when it is not culturally acceptable, it feels like an imposition. So both should go hand in hand, and leaders should understand this and act according to that. And also, in my climate journey, like in the project that I was working on in the temple based project, so what I personally faced that there were also failures in those journeys. So the next generation of leaders should also accept failures because climate journey in Southeast Asia is not going to be easy. It is not going to be a clean map or a clean linear structure. It is going to be congested. It is going to be collapsed. So I think the leaders should understand that, and those who accept failures in that journey and learn from those failures and implement it in a further way. So those having that mindset would succeed at last. So that is my point of view on the next generation of leaders.
Okay, thank you so much, Amita. Now, I wanna ask the participants if they have any questions for our esteemed panelist. If yes, you can just unmute your mic or drop the question in the comments.
Aruj, they won't be able to unmute themselves. They need to raise their hands and then we will
Okay,
unmute themselves.
you can all just raise your hand if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I want to talk about Megwar. He's saying that due to climate change in Parker, thousands animal and household are impacted by skylight every year. Okay, yeah, that's very true. Afifa Zia has a question. Okay. Dulab, can you unmute her?
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, so I want to start by saying that all the speakers here are incredible and they give such great insights. It's honestly amazing for me as a student to see women in such places. One question that I would like to ask everyone is about their opinions, their views on AI and how it's affecting climate change. I hope that everyone here is aware that data centers around the world can consume about 800 billion liters of water annually. So I would like to ask, while AI can be efficiently used to solve climate related problems, are there any less risky alternatives that are practical for South Asian countries?
So, anyone want to answer this question?
Anyone who want to go first? If not, then Afifa, I think that was you who asked this question. First thing is, Afifa, that we are living in 21st century. It's like very hard for us. But the thing is, yes, we can limit the use of AI because first thing first is do not follow trends either on TikTok or Instagram, the Gemini trend, the photo trend of the, turn my photo into the 90s. That's like, this is bizarre. This just don't make any sense. See, there are like a lot of discussion around these things that either we should use AI or not. I'm a climate activist, and I know that AI is dangerous, but I believe that nowadays, we cannot live or we cannot survive without AI. But the thing is, in my whole life, we can say that for past 3 or 4 years, I literally don't I didn't give any my picture to AI and say, okay, turn this into some kind of this picture or etc. Because I think this is rubbish. This is because if you start some kind of a trend and people just follow that trend, and then it kind of famous in billions of people, and they follow that thing. So this is horrific. This is not cool. So I think if you are referring to AI, I must say that you can limit the use of AI, but we cannot completely vanish AI from 21st century. That's my take on this as a climate activist. Yes.
Thank you, Aisha and Afifa. I hope she has answered. Okay, yes, Afifa.
Miss Aisha, I agree with every single point, and I'm really happy that someone else shares my opinions, and it's very, it's a moment of elation for me. But there's a point that I really want to ask. Like, yes, AI is avoidable in today's age, and like everyone is using AI. I use AI, but I try to limit my use. Like you said, do not follow trends, do not like pictures and stuff. I a few months ago, I tried debating a few people about the use of AI, a few educated people about the use of AI, educated in such a way that they were aware of climate change, they were aware of the SDGs, they were like, they are generally educated and they are open to opinions and such. Um, I found it hard to make them understand. It was I hope that you're aware of the theory of the commons, where someone is like, it doesn't matter if I do this because everyone else is doing it, and so I just want to ask. I've been telling everyone to limit the use of AI. Do not stop it completely because that's unavoidable, of course, in today's age. But how do we make people understand that, like, they're just bored and that they're joking with AI, they're joking with ChatGPT, they're doing such stuff. And how do you make them understand that a simple time pass for you is having such disastrous consequences to the rest of the world, and it will happen to you too in a few years? Um, that's something that sort of confuses me. Can anyone please help in this regard?
Afifa, I understand your question. Arena, do you wanna go?
I'd like to add this. Okay, hope you don't mind. Okay, we are talking about limiting the use of AI, right? But AI is the future, so I don't think we can ask anyone to limit the use of AI. It's their personal choice how they use AI in their daily life. But I think the prior question of Afia was the huge data centers, they are affecting our environment negatively because huge amount of energy is used in cooling the data centers. But I think we can shift to green infrastructures, establishing the data centers in naturally cooler places. Then I think it will be a quite costly, shifting the data centers to a comparatively cooler areas. But yes, using hydropower, nuclear energy in running the data centers can be a good option and can be environmental friendly as well. So by that, we can get benefited by AI and also not destroy the environment. And remaining, it depends on the individual, how you use and how do you limit yourself to the use of AI. Thank you.
I hope Irina has answered your question, Afifa, or do you still want to ask something? Okay, so I hope her question has been answered. Now, moving on towards Hamad, he is asking what are the main reasons of climate change? If you think that green gases are simply majorly responsible, so what are we doing for those gases? And what are we doing plantation for? So, plantation is not the only solution because carbon dioxide is much more less harmful than the remaining greenhouse gases. So, how can we control other greenhouse gases? Is there anyone who wanna answer this question? So, his question is basically other than plantation, what are we doing to control all these gases? Because if we are just planting trees, then we might not be able to control it in such a way. So, what are some other things that we are doing? Maybe we are controlling other uses for that. Maybe we are uh, scaling down on using ACEs or something like that. So, anyone want to answer this question?
I would like to answer this question.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, do you all know about cultivation of rice? Like, so cultivation of rice is causing greenhouse emissions. Is anybody aware of that? Yes. So cultivation of rice emits methane gas. And also when we are doing dairy farming, so due to this chewing of cattle, methane gas is emitted from those cattle. So emission forms can be found from different sources and solutions can be shaped and decided according to the source from which the greenhouse gas is emitted. So as if we speak for methane gas, so we could make innovations in dairy farming and we could make varieties in rice that emits less amount of methane, or we could go to alternate drying and wetting pattern of irrigation and rice cultivation to reduce those methane gases. So only and when we know the source from which the greenhouse gas is coming, according to that, we could design the solution. For example, in cattle farming, they give feeds that produce less methane gas from the mouths of the cattle to reduce emission. So based on that, solutions can be decided. So that is my opinion. So if you could specify which greenhouse gas and from which source it's coming, so we could all discuss what kind of solution could be provided. And that is my opinion on the question.
I'd just like to add a point, other than better livestock management, I think reducing food wastage would also